BookTube, welcome back. I'm Winx and the ink I'm talking about today is my April wrap-up. So as always, I'll start off with a few statistics. This month I read a total of 7 books. 5 of these were novels, 1 was a short story, and 1 was a graphic novel. As far as genres go, 2 were mysteries, 1 was, I'll call science fiction and fantasy, 1 was just fantasy, 1 was urban fantasy, 1 was fantasy of manners, and 1 was a queer romance. I read 4 of these books in physical copy and 3 of them on my Kindle. And then as far as ratings go, there was a pretty wide spectrum this month. So on the low end, there was 1 book that I gave 2 stars, 1 book I gave 3.5, technically I gave it 4 on Goodreads, but my official rating is 3.5. There were 3 books then that I gave 4 stars and 2 books that I gave 5 stars. The first book that I read this month was Sorcery and Cecelia, or the Enchanted Chocolate Pot. And I actually started this one originally in March, but I was in this like epic fantasy mode and I just really could not make the switch over to fantasy of manners, and like I was on the edge of DNFing it, but I decided just to put it down, finish the fantasy trilogy that I was reading, and then come back to it in April. And I'm really glad I did that because coming back to it in the right mood definitely made all the difference for me, and I was actually able to enjoy this one. Overall, I thought it was really cute, the magic was fun, it's a Regency era book, and I really enjoyed the language that came along with that. There were definitely a good number of highlight worthy quotes in there, so I was marking that all up in my Kindle as I went along. I also really liked the narrative for this book. So if you aren't familiar with it, this book is told through letters between the 2 main characters. They're 2 best friends. One of them has to go off to London for a while and one of them is stuck back in their hometown, so they're corresponding through these letters just to keep up with each other and let each other know what's going on, and each of them is sort of getting into their own mischief, and their stories start to come together to form this one magical adventure. So yeah, it's very cute and very charming. I don't read a lot of fantasy of manners books and I really enjoyed reading this one. This is the one that I gave 3.5 stars to. I think it would have been a 4-star read for me, except I didn't like how the relationships ended up at the end. I won't spoil it since it really is like the very ending, but I thought that how all the relationships ended up seemed a little bit too convenient and a little bit too similar. All of the relationships seem to follow a similar trope, which I would have enjoyed if it had just been one relationship, but it happened like 3 times, and so that kind of bugged me, and that's why I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, just because that bothered me. But otherwise, I thought it was a really fun read. I definitely recommend it, and I will definitely be looking into more books by these authors in the future. The next book I read was one I was super excited about, and it is The Murder of Mary Russell by Lourie King, which is the latest Mary Russell book and came out in April. It came out on the 5th and I had it all pre-ordered, so I was very anxiously awaiting the arrival of that one on my Kindle. So this was a very different Mary Russell novel than what is usual for Mary Russell novels. This is the 14th in the series, so there have been quite a few and the style has been sort of set. So it was a little bit jarring to see how this one changed. Normally all the books are written basically from Mary Russell's perspective. This one, however, was not. There were spots where it was from Mary Russell's perspective, but most of the book was not from her perspective, and in fact jumped around through different perspectives and different periods in time. Most of the story was actually not about Mary Russell and was about the backstory of Mrs. Hudson as well as her relationship with Sherlock Holmes. As someone who really likes character development and especially loves these characters, that was something I really appreciated getting to read more of. It also kind of made me a little bit anxious actually while I was reading it, because I have these really clear images of characters like Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, Mrs. Hudson, and I can be very picky when I see those characters changing in any way in a Sherlock Holmes adaptation. So I was a little bit worried that something in the backstory was going to happen with Mrs. Hudson or Sherlock or whatever, and it wouldn't mesh with my view of those characters and I like wouldn't be able to enjoy it, but luckily that was not the case. There was nothing that really conflicted with my basic idea of the characters, but there was a lot of really unexpected and fun and new ideas. And one of the things I enjoyed is that a lot of the story was actually connected to one of the original Sherlock Holmes stories, which is the Gloria Scott case. You don't have to have read the Gloria Scott case to read this book. Any points of the original story that are important are talked about already in the book, so you are covered if you are going in without having read it. However, if you have read it, it does add a bit of depth and some extra fun to it. As a fan of the original Sherlock Holmes stories, I love seeing when adaptations or extended universe books do a tip of the hat to original Sherlock stories, so definitely appreciated that. Then, since the Mary Russell book involved the Gloria Scott case, the next thing I read was the Gloria Scott case. So it's a short story. It's not very long. It was only about 50 pages, I think. But it's been a good while since I reread the original Sherlock stories, so I've been wanting to do that anyway. And since the Mary Russell novel connected so much with the Gloria Scott case, I thought it would be fun to sort of read them back to back, and I think it added a little extra something to both of them having done that, so that was very fun. And this story, if you have not read it, is where Sherlock is telling Watson about his first ever case, basically. In the end, the case was unsolved, but Sherlock basically says that this case is what planted the idea that maybe he could do this sort of thing for a living, and just led him to the consulting detective that he became. So that's definitely a fun one. The next book I read was In the Labyrinth of Drakes by Marie Brennan, and this is the 4th book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. I loved this book. It was one of my 5-star reads for the month, and it is definitely my favorite in the series so far. All of the books so far have been set in a different region of the world, so we've seen a lot geographically, but we've also experienced a lot of different cultures in that world, and there's been sort of whispers of some political intrigue that is getting stirred up, and in this book it definitely takes a big step forward. So that added a lot to the plot of the story. It was very exciting, and I really loved the relationships in this book. So the main character, Isabella, is going on yet another expedition, and again going with her good friend Tom, who we've seen their friendship develop over the course of the books, and there was a lot of focus on their friendship in the last book, and that was one of my favorite parts of it. So that continues into this book. But this time, Tom and Isabella have gotten their expedition funded because they are essentially doing work for the military/government, and they both feel a bit weird about that, but the work itself seems like it is for the greater good and is also something that they're really interested in, so they take the job and head off to study these dragons. But Isabella's brother manages to get stationed at the place where they are going, so we get to see a lot of the interactions with him, and I love his character. He's just like really sarcastic, and I like the relationship between him and Isabella. There's also a character from the 3rd book who I specifically said in my wrap-up of that book that I hoped he showed up again, because I didn't feel like I was personally finished with him. I wanted to see more of his character and more of his interactions with the rest of the main characters, and he shows up and he has a huge role in this book. So that was really exciting, and I love how all of that went. It just made me really happy, and yeah, just everything seemed to come together in this book and work together in a way that was really awesome and really satisfying to me as a reader, so love this one. Then the graphic novel I read this month was Nimona by Noelle Stevenson, and this was my other 5-star read. This book was adorable. The artwork itself is just really fun and fresh and dripping with cuteness. I loved it. And the characters are generally kind of like silly and ridiculous, but in the best way possible. But then also the characters ended up getting me in the feels a few times, which was pretty unexpected with just how like cutesy and silly the book started out. I also really didn't expect to get that attached to the characters and their relationships, but I did, and I could not put this book down. I read it start to finish in one evening, and I cannot wait to read more of Noelle Stevenson's stuff. I've got Lumberjanes Volume 1, so I will be starting in on that one soon, hopefully. Then for my 2-star book. This was Departure from the Script by Jay, and it's a queer romance basically following this actress who meets this photographer and the relationship that blooms between those two. The frustrating thing about this is that the writing was really easy to get into and would have made for a pretty quick read if I didn't have the other things that I'm going to talk about. I also think that the story itself is good. It could have been a satisfying, like, quick, fluffy romance book, but the characters. The main character, Amanda, she just had all these hang-ups on the idea of masculinity and female masculinity. Amanda seems to see the world in a very closed way. To Amanda, if you are female and you choose to wear jeans, then it's like super scandalous, and she has to deal with all these feelings about how she feels about you and your masculinity, and yeah, it just, not a fan of that at all. do not like Amanda, would not be friends. Also, and this is not at all related to gender, but there is a point in the book where Amanda goes on a date to this restaurant, and the waiter comes to the table a total of 4 times. Get the drink order, bring the drinks, get the food order, bring the food. But apparently, Amanda was having a really good time on this date and getting into some really good conversations, and felt completely inconvenienced by the waiter who dared to bring her drinks and then bring her food once it was ready, and thus, I guess, momentarily interrupted a good conversation. And because of this rudeness, she decides that she's not going to tip him, and she's probably not going to go back to the restaurant. Later, someone asks her if she wants to go to that restaurant, and she says no because she's afraid of seeing that waiter again. Like, was he supposed to bring your food when it's cold so you can better time your conversation? Like, that's the opposite of what people would want to happen. You want your food when it's hot. That was very nice of that person to bring you the food when it was ready. So, yeah. The story itself was fine. The writing I enjoyed. The character I could not stand. And because the book was from Amanda's point of view, it was hard to tell if it was just Amanda not getting these things or if it's the author not getting these things. But whoever was not getting the things, it was the voice of the entire story, and that just infuriated me. So that is why I gave this book 2 stars. I'm actually curious to read other things by this author to see if the same problems exist, because I think that, like I said, the writing was good and the actual storyline seemed perfect for a cute, fluffy, satisfying romance book. But I will definitely have to take some time just to get over this book, otherwise I know I'm going to go in biased and just be looking for things to nitpick. So maybe in the future I will try more from this person, but for now, not a fan. And that brings me to my final book, which is The Void by J.D. Horn, and this is the 3rd book in the Witching Savannah series. I started this book last weekend and then had sort of a reading lull during the week, not related to the book, just like general need to vegetate and watch reality TV and do nothing that requires brain power. But I got back into it and it was really fun. I have said this before and I will say it again. I think this series would make a great TV show like True Blood or Vampire Diaries. It's just, there's so many twists, you never know who you can trust, what thing is true, who's going to stab you in the back, but who's your secret ally. Everything is just twists and turns in a highly dramatic and magical way. And I mean magic literally, like they're witches and there's magic. And yeah, just, it's really intriguing and really fun, and I personally don't relate a lot to the main character in this series, Mercy, and normally that's sort of a requirement that I feel this connection to this character to walk through their story with them. And the fact that I did not have that connection to Mercy, but I still felt invested in the story, says something to me. I think that speaks quite a bit about the actual story itself and the drama and the magic and the fun. And I am very excited to read the 4th book in May, which is Gilo, and is a prequel book to the other 3. So I'm actually kind of curious to see if Gilo is supposed to be the last one, because I could see this being just a wrapped up trilogy after this one, so I don't know how much more is going to come out, but I will investigate that. Alright, so that's my April wrap up and my rambling thoughts on all the books that I read this month. Definitely let me know in the comments if you guys have read any of these books and have thoughts on them, or if you're planning to read them, or just comment to let me know what you read this month. Do you have any favorite picks from the month? I would love to hear it. Alright, so please like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. I hope everybody's week is going good, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye!